Give me 1 second to pull up the Macy.
Bro, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. Oh, yeah.
Internet's been slow. Is everyone good to go?
About these very young kids getting gender affirming care. They don't tell you what that is they're actually giving very young girls double mastectomies. They want to castrate these young boys. That's wrong. 10, 12, 13-year-old kids, based on gender dysphoria, 80% of it resolves anyways by the time they get older. I think these doctors need to get sued for what's happening. I'm sorry.
Note: the references to nuclear panic overshadow the trans messaging. Consider omitting.
The first nuclear bomb was built at Los Alamos in 1945, ushering in an international security regime in which the threat of total annihilation became a seemingly new reality. In order to manage this threat, the birth of the atomic age invested the heteronormative white domestic sphere with new ideological meaning. Atomic blasts are measured by their impacts on a large size house and led to the nuclear family's role as a bulwark against the communist threat. White domesticity helped the public acclimate to atomic tech. The Bikini Sea was famously named after the atoll of the Marshall Islands, where the AC tested its mighty weapons. Attractive women were dubbed bombshells, a name that implied their beauty could be devastating. Cold War culture equated the protection of a sanctified white domestic sphere with the protection of the nation. The nuclear family sat at the heart of patriotic anti-communist white life. Enter Christine Jorgensen, a former soldier from the Bronx. Christine entered a pharmacy in 1949, asking for estradiol, telling the clerk it was for a research project. After going to Denmark for sex reassignment surgery here, her transition quickly made international headlines, with People Today reporting in 1954 after other transsexual stories had broken in the media that next to the recurrent hydrogen bomb headlines, reports of sex changes are becoming the most consistently startling world news. Jorgensen's hypervisibility meant that the spectacle of transsexuality had mushroomed into public consciousness during the early days of the Cold War, with all the force of a blistering hot wind roaring across the Trinity test site. This new nuclear force, in tandem with the bomb, was weaponized to produce a political economy oriented around the consolidation of the nuclear family by upholding the sanctity of white womanhood. Skidmore, 11, trans women primarily Jorgensen, the most proximity white women who get the most visibility. The white trans women were able to reject transsexuality as acceptable subject to community, embodiment of the norms of white women who domesticity, respectability, and heterosexuality. The Marshall Islands and Marilyn Laverne Peterson and Lisa Noon were less intelligible, authentic, free white women, therefore appeared as subjects to ridicule. White gender ideologies regulate which bodies mirror within the public sphere. Legitimate narrative structures allow the picture of the transsexual to have coherence. Popular cultural political record uphold the nuclear family's American ideal of social formation, promising natural defense against communism. The social formation of the civility of the nuclear family fell under scrutiny. The U.S. Senate held hearings on homosexual spring the birth of thousands of lesbians and gay men, increased police surveillance as one heterosexual domestically oriented woman. Jorgensen's appearance appeared the short continued dominance of gender roles in reference to white heteropatriarchy. Jorgensen's intelligibility rested upon her participation in a nuclear family unit. Jorgensen appeared to several photographs when she was cooking in the kitchen with her mother. The produced Jorgensen's body through notes of middle class respectability. Jorgensen's pretty, personable, unpleasant, by any standard. Jorgensen's femininity is enabled by her embodiment of respectability, a vital aspect of white womanhood because of its connection to civility. To be the readily acceptable, Jorgensen's body has to be intelligible as heterosexual. Jorgensen distanced herself from homosexuality with cross-dressing after surgeons have successfully reassigned her sex. She did not dress as a woman until the sex on her passport has officially been changed. Jorgensen linked her embodiment in terms of proper U.S. citizenship and narrated her sex reassignment through allegiance to the disciplining apparatus of the USA. Jorgensen to articulate conservative sexual mores to assure the readers that her public presence was not motivated by political jealousy and to challenge the sanctity of heteropatriarchy. Jorgensen is able to prevent the press from defining her because she had access to the institutional power of white womanhood. The resolution of call to debate nuclear force has not been detached from the nuclear family logic that shaped the contours of civic Jamie. Jorgensen's story was spectacular because domesticity is fundamental to the nuclear family. You need to have transsexual technologies have the capability to threaten the foundations of U.S. empire. In order to manage the threat, the U.S. had to create the image of acceptable transsexual in relation to racialized systems of hierarchy. Just as nuclear attack split the atom to destroy matter, transsexual attack destroyed the stability and the materiality of sex, demanding new epistemological frameworks for the production of embodiment. Orchestras' spectacularity can be read as a map of the transsexual phenomenon, ontology, and practice that re-signify the relationship between gender, subject, and sex, flash to revamping the global spectacle of her transsexuality as a white post-colonial phenomenon. Her person is racialized, others are blending opaque, her own racialization represent functions of the white screen on which is production, all this fantasized natural wealth, glamour, mobility, liberation, self-fashion situated according to a spatialized racial hierarchy that locates whiteness as a colonizing imperative point of origin through the figure of Christy Jorgensen, the outlines of a new U.S. polity, a global post-colonial empire linking bodies, identities, territories, and populations becomes visible. Any discussion of nuclear reductions that fails to theorize the intimate connections between nuclearism and the family will reproduce the logistics of empire and anti-trans violence that mark trans as a threat to creation. As countless anti-trans bills are introduced and passed, debate deploys a narrative coherence centered around apocalypticism and supposedly liberal policy discussions to lock in ongoing logics of elimination. Trans people are forced to erase our history, stories, and archives for safety or transition, while the scientific study of transis is conducted by cis people. Transis only gains coherence within the rehearsed scripts of debate if it is localizable, measurable, and observable, like the atom. In response, this debate is about alternative world-making tactics, what we do here and now to make life livable. The 1AC holds together a dual, the 1AC program of trans existentialism holds together a dual set of commitments towards trans archival practice, liberation, and networks of care that challenge the epidemic violence of spectacular narratives like Jorgensen's. The precarity of nuclear forces amidst a constellation of sheer collectivity. Holly, to one cisgender society constructs trans subjects to objects of medical discourse to development of trans archives obscured by dominant frameworks within cisgender society. I propose an alternative program with the aim of the full suspension of cisgender arts categories that I call transgender existentialism. Certain assumptions are so deeply ingrained that a systematic procedure is required for the complete suspension. The trans phenomenologist brackets the cisgender attitude cultivated possession to organize society based on mandatory gender identification through it into a return to trans experience itself. The text seems completely anarchic from the classic cisgender perspective. An uneasy blending poetry, lit theater, and scenes, trans story, archival consideration, trans stories being complex means by which these narratives are distorted by cisgender frame. What is our history? Who are dead? How do we come to misunderstand and misrecognize one another? For post-genders, where structures trans people into a relatively coherent set of events that happy childhood confliction once queerness with transit, epiphany, confessional moment, the beginning of transition and closure. What is at stake is a suspension of cisgender attitudes to produce a trans archive that remains nevertheless incomplete. That in contemporary notion of gender is an outgrowth of epistemological crisis concerning sex, territories, person, Salomon adopt a cisgender orientation towards trans identity by posing the unity of trans experience and shared narrative coherence. Trans existentialism proposes that trans people have an existential rather than identical unity. What trans people share as a unity of situation, project, and responsibility rather than resemblance between properties, gender dysphoria, tribe, the alienation, and unfreedom experienced by trans subjects in cisgender society. Trans existentialism sees the unity of trans people as essentially precarious themselves of a shared collective resolution. When we choose to transition that entails a revolutionary political consequence, requires upturning cisgender society. The neutralization of cisgender society must extend beyond the armchair of the phenomenologist into material neutralization of cisgender society, which is to say, into the streets. Trans existentialism demands a restriction of the nuclear forces which constitute new violence of the nuclear family. This restriction emerges from the impossibility of trans sociality, supplanting the nuclear family and nuclear state, the fugitive collectivity. For those who have been disappeared, for Lisa, Marcel, Laverne, for those who haven't been invited, for Letitia, trans existentialism is the company of tea times, bodies beginning to creep back through the house. These are the sites of trans belonging. Production lines as chopping boards, mutual aid shared out on plates, the quiet nights of caffeine, red wine, conversation, the afternoons of group mates, collations of what becomes communities, these moments of autumn turning out to winter with the demise of daylight, the rapid switch into the wane of early afternoons, the air electric to reap content, its failure, the practice of youthful irresponsibility, the impractice of sharing domestic space with strangers. She moved her hands to maintain the connection of the wood directly into the presence of memory again. Might all wooden tables link through the form of the feminist diaspora, the practices of collective care, mutual aid, the communal form. She thought of Sarah Ahmed, of Kitchen Table Press, of Jen Ritterwarn's book, of how this constellation could span backwards the decades, forwards to future formations. It's impossible, though, with all the touristification, but this is how it goes. We get together around a table, a kitchen table. We talk while chopping vegetables. Remember when that random person stopped to ask us about the zine, the new zine? All of that coheres around a communal table, dinner bowls, the lift and carry of voices, herbal array, the play of tunes from memories backwards, the bringing together of queer and trans optimism, a possible politics of new socialities, a communal form, affects cohere us together, solidarity, substantiating a context, institutional or predictable, obscure or precarious, a flow of white feminists through a stairwell, how the fabrics and thoughts of the body materialize, what categories of being, what labeling denying humanity are necessary for solidarity to emerge. Solidarity, a process of sublimation with the development of capitalist social relations, the labor market, to the possibilities of queer social forms, percepts and sounds and memories, having a profound physical effect on the body. But is this enough? What forms of social, cultural, and material organization might be assembled even within the capitalist day world such that we could feed, enrich, maintain each other, break down the isolation? Collectivity teaches and motivates us to orient our work, our attentions, and care towards each other. But why the need to bring ourselves together like this? To feel a sense of belonging, sure, in a context where difference and precarity might have denied a sense of home, to pool the recompense of our labor sold for wages, to show that we are more than our value, to build something for a community, to demonstrate the power of working together materially, to know that we are not alone. Precarious queer and trans people are used to watching our homes disappear with the creep of capital bulldoze, or render to us a spectacular image, but the anxiety and the power play and the meeting, small moments of organization and shared work built around the table, the relationships. And the private dwelling was a home made in smaller ways. Within it, reproductive labor established itself according to need, supply, gender, time, race, dwell, longing to the home abandoned. Fragments of love pale, stretching through the curtains, damp with cries, melodrama, modernity, and all of where we are pushed by the call, demand, and dispersal of body.
You good? Good. So like towards the bottom of the act, you talk about some things that the act sort of affirms, things like tea times, quiet nights of caffeine and wine. Right before that, you talk about how the state is reproducing anti-trans bills, locking trans folk into a logic of elimination. What do the aforementioned tea times, quiet nights of caffeine do to resolve those structural forces?
Well, the 1AC affirms not those things in a vacuum, but those things within a program of trans existentialism that brackets the cisgender attitude from our politics and orients us towards three things: trans archival practice, liberation, and networks of care. The 1AC, in response to the kind of like proliferation of like anti-trans violence at the state, might understand the necessity to orient towards like probably those networks of care that might be able to challenge
Networks of care like tea times, or what networks of care are we referring to?
Well, I think that the
And how is the 1AC care? How do we know what care is?
Yeah, I think that the 2AC will give some examples of these things. I think our argument is that those are the things that make life livable. I think we might defend something like Miss Major's needle sharing program,
Okay,
or New World Disorder, which
making
takes
life
up public space.
making life livable through, I guess, like the examples that we talked about at the top would be like ways that we make our life livable. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like
Okay.
It engages in that
Okay.
through
Bet.
transexualism.
Okay, so this next set of questions is sort of about like the very beginning of the 1AC. So you play this clip about how gender affirming care and things of that nature are sort of demonized, pathologized in the
that's
status
not.
quo. No?
No.
That's not.
The point of that clip. I think the point of that clip is, I think, maybe most clearly articulated through the kind of voice that comes on, where it says, notice how the references to, nuclear like explosions overshadow the anti-trans rhetoric. This is an
So
argument
wait, so how
about
do
the way
nuclear
that
explosions determine why that Senate, or why that person was talking about like gender affirming care being
This
bad?
is an argument about the way that the coherence of the narrative coherence of the nation produces things like duck and cover that shore up the bounds of acceptable
This doesn't
embodiment
really respond to my.
and
This doesn't respond to my question
I
about
just
how the
disagree.
1AC is able to sort of intervene in the demonization of gender.
I'm really
affirming care.
confused what
Does
we
the
think
1AC
we're supposed to do about Ron DeSantis. Like,
The-
what?
Okay,
I do not
so-
understand the premise of
Okay,
this.
so then how do you resolve any of your impacts about
We
trans
made an
folk being
argument about
locked
like
into
networks
a
of care
system
and
of
laboratory
elimination?
strategies is the only thing that can orient us towards things that materially solve for trans people in the face of ongoing anti-trans violence. Like, Ron DeSantis does fuck shit. That's why we need networks of
Which
care.
why we need networks of care that if they don't get actually
Like, do you know how
Because
many
it's the
trans
same
kids
board
have gone in front of the
argument
boards
about
of
the
these states
the
and been
argument
like, I
about
need
the Trinity
HRT?
test site? Why begin there? Why is that a good starting point?
Well, I don't think that I think that the 1AC has begun there as a way of historicizing the place where a nuclear bomb was built alongside the place where, alongside the kind of suburban, like the lab was inseparable from the suburb, right? And therefore white womanhood, became alongside
It's
the
about
bomb.
Christine Jorgensen.
Yeah.
It be pushing the news of the nuclear bomb on the highway.
Yeah,
Okay, fair enough.
Is the topic I want to see about.
yeah. Sorry, private or is it-
Oh, I'll
No.
take it out right now.
How many hours?
Two in case.
This is the wrong email that I have open.
Oh, to defend an example of topical action by the United States they don't resolve mean enacted by law. The first of France 64 resolve to establish by law. The United States can be the federal government or agencies, Cornell Law School in 90. Person who is an actual person or corporation or partnership or any other public or private entity as either local government, United States federal corporation, agency, or other entity of the U.S. That's either the DOD or the NNSA. That's GA. No, the DOD manages the system of or NNSA manages the nuclear warheads and bombs and public infrastructure capabilities needed to produce and maintain these weapons and nuclear force or warheads delivery systems and infrastructure. That's Pillar 22. The U.S. currently maintains nuclear forces that comes into nuclear submarines, ICBMs, bombers, also reportedly includes a few hundred nuclear guarding competency. All these systems warheads delivery vehicles and the infrastructure on which they rely. The basic design of the current U.S. nuclear force danger to around 2010 bombs and PR. And our interpretation provides an intent to exclude individual actors cannot dictate nuclear force policy. That's the U.S. House of no day that. And then it's the policy of the United States in general. No individual may take any action against arbitrary and direct or national and secure laboratory nuclear weapons production and facility member of the Nuclear Weapons Council representing views of the director member to the president of the NNC or Congress regarding nuclear forces has to transfer nuclear weapons stockpile and nuclear forces to a vice versa procedural fairness and limited point states necessary for effective limits, which provides equitable ground to both sides. Fairness is a key to effective dialogue. The area interpretation led to a monologue that's subverts the role of the negative. And second is limits and clash. They mix with the topic and make debate unworkable. The negative applicants get to redefine the grounds of the debate and get to pick their own version of the topic. Exhausts research and nuance clash over the season and reading the argument on the negative enables high level contestation and produces in-depth education. And next topic, when it sees describes the challenge to nuclear violence that ultimately demutualizes its practices, then locks the new atom to a pessimistic rejection of organizing a mass struggle that's cloud. And then when it describes the yellow behind materialism, conceptual tools and unwarranted pessimism, but at the level of the stages, arguments are no longer effective in theories of scholarship and academics are random which crafting oppositional politics and no both tone of potential we recognize agency and illusion of humanism is self-proclaimed without any access no way combining the real existing more custom producing their rhetoric. So these sort of differences operate within regimes expectations so we can take it over raising transformative knowledge in the mass performance of world making is each coping mechanism ultimately feeds into a new level form of subjectivity for environmental destruction and extraction and surveillance or inevitable absent of effective material resistance blood burden. 78 to constitute a self-distinct from the market as motivation society laws to maintain increases social inequality, environmental degradation, predatory resource wars of policing and surveillance, ultimately unsustainable discourse of radical change, simulated control, ideal versus substitution between status quo, and by means of simulation for affirming possibility of the alternative they hope to cope with the problem the utopia's reproduction of the status quo, the experience of simulated subject to the real alternatives or constructed digital simulation. This society's only way of coping. In the aesthetic intervention fails to challenge the material forces that work in that construction of the political economy. The app limits the scope of politics to the individual, non-material that cannot be translated into a belligerent war resistance as Grabner would intend. Combining resistance poetics, limits the scope of practice that will poetics and further focus on individual creativity rather than all wider cultural practices. Neoliberalism levels of well-being can be best advanced by liberating individual entrepreneurial freedoms that are actually not politician of death or by the justification for continuing neoliberal politics and neoliberalism can inform the creative imagination which I through our but the intent of the artist, the compositional functions of art and culture and the competition are important. The neoliberal imaginary is not exclusively just violence and these more complex and contest and analysis instances all the importance of cultural movements. These are limited because they fail to recognize the economic power of movements and capitalist relations were expanded to substitute all social production and capitalism fuel cycles of climate change and militarism that cause extinction that's Zerber and Handel 23. The existential threat is present in the Russian acceleration of climate change points escalating risk of nuclear war from an unstable militarized American order in Ukraine and the new Cold War with the China working towards the Middle East capitalism fuels climate change militarism provide reason to elevating profit commitment to growth and control markets and resources producing commodity for market rather than with its concentrating power among at least forces lead to market to ignore institutions to treat them as externalities coming military that are each of them feeling forever war and particular war with positive period of remissions. The tourism marine tanks will planes and munitions and more than 1,000 military bases also industry is indisputable from capitalism coal and oil blessed likely to be viewed as a part of the common sense of ship of coal toward oil was driven by the social political interest rather than take advantage of union in the 19th to 20th century securing oil and the nation was a major factor in the U.S. interest in the Pacific and capitalism fuels the cycle of what I just said. The alternative is dual power organizing in the face of capitalist oppression, operating outside of bourgeoisie institutions is key to create class solidarity for anti-capitalism movements, and that's law 18. People represent the state as an institutional charge that class the capitalist class that relies on state institutions to maintain its position. The ruling class police, armies, and various other state agencies making already relations that protect the power of the ruling class struggle is being waged within society. United police, various sides of the struggle continue the ruling class and using the state to wage it. If we usually fight for the class struggle, so that's the market which ensure class domination alongside the capitalist state. There exists institute looking at the need for workers, but also control of the Soviet provided government services like mail long-term programs that can meet the need of workers. When a coup was attempted, which was loyal to the Bolshevik faction, repelled the plotters for me. This institution could not provide for the needs of all also for their defense in that instead of integrating into the workforce of the state, they could operate outside of it to build dual power, so much power was elected by representatives who served workers in the time, and keep removal with the masses for little black leaders became militant vegetable in New York, so people going without health care and build the IWO has sort of the people are to build dual power, the movement to do this is underway for the socialists, build dual power to the GAD programs, and unions, worker collectives, build serve the people programs, and take on stand up resistance to gentrification and gates. Frame presumptions the question of why vote activate, even if other things matter, will always revolve around about which the applicant must justify receiving dole by either the app completes their scholarship with new practices that becomes instantly regressive about what is new or disruptive enough means that lectures, books, and discussions of the app better because debates about negation or dialogue, or the app was a form of practice and does not necessitate the ballot because reading the one needs to resolve their impact with the app was practice and negative say that the app is indivisibly good and it does not need negation because there's only a negation requires us to negate their resistance strategies which becomes toxic and drains energy and materiality is a key point of analysis in the fight for transliberation demands for decriminalization, access to gender affirming care and basic services and all battles that must be taken up as institution demands so that the effort goes as arc less than all intent. A decade ago, almost no legal advocacy around trans issues existed how to use privilege and skills to improve health, safety, and life trans without reinforcing structure to bring experiences of leadership of low-income trans people of color to the table to set the agenda that disapproach reinforce the idea that entitlements of capitalism as they exist in our current neoliberal economic system, other than things that we all want are private healthcare, and focus on the public healthcare system fails to provide basic care to particularly trans people seeking access to gender affirming care, gentrification, policing, the immigrant communities, racialized safety, criminalization, incarceration, and transphobia, and schools, main education, inaccessible, unable to open children. Jobs, benefit, safety, or survival, capitalism, and democracy operate on presumption of scarcity, whiteness, known as wealth, Christianity, heterosexuality, gender normativity, perfect by laws and social policies, without looking at the recent causes of transphobia that maintain capitalism will only protect the structures of the empire structure that result in decrease that change in important ways that support movements, roundtable conferences, identify, discuss, and pursue various strategies for advancing the rights, applying these to the transgender legal advocacy, alternative frameworks to support the movements without replicating structures of oppression, studies of collaboration with community organizing, and that program for social change, focus on community organizing using empowerment models and leadership from community organizing in the context of trans liberation. Reducing the scale of axons to only the debate phase is profoundly unethical. Reorienting educational emphasis towards global problems, it provides tools to fully attack all forms of injustice, government during 11. Benefiting local impacts, confirmed was not political advocacy reference to larger global relations were unable to in part because they understood globalization as something going on in the world outside. This allowed every into local with every way to connect to larger social foundation people who authentically want to listen to suffering and left only in limited scope for their participation. As well, educators who were in a way that openness and leave us with underdeveloped conceptual tools to understand our historical moment. Their academic project does not do anything for queer people. They fall prey to the liberalism that destroys the possibility of effective protest and change that Shaw 115. The Western Academy is an obstacle to justice to academic attack on identity politics, prisons, revolution, passing prejudice with the reformer obstacle for the position of those speaking such attacks have not been able to translate themselves in real gain revolution action against senior when has been well and has not granted comfort zone down to the liberal academy of reconsists of only no amount of modern revolution of identity will take away from the real abuse and real political laws deconstruct identities exist no less actually within the realm of political work. The out of deconstruct identity cannot occur in a political milieu push out effective protest only viable have to just is actually creating real community mutual respect and equality in intellectual and scholarly life is appearances deviant or self-depression lead to adaptive responses and dreams from balance and actually decide to disengage. We cannot simply reconstruct technologies facts and economics of political it's binary cannot generate the collective energy of organization necessary to challenge existing structures.
No.
You get the concept.
Yeah, let me just get one real quick. Alright.
I want to start on the K. What is dual power organizing?
So Escalante indicates that dual power is building institutions parallel to the state that sort of operate to meet the needs of people
Okay.
who are experiencing the excesses of capitalism.
Okay, alright. So this, I guess, what kind of organizations might you refer?
What do you mean, what kind of organization?
Well,
like, we
the card sites, things like the PSL, sites of the DSA.
Well,
it talks about, it gives a bunch of examples. Those are like ways that dual power has come to
Wait,
fruition.
all of those
We don't
orgs
think
have
that
used
those are
dual power?
necessarily
All of
legal.
those orgs have used
It
dual
also
power?
gives examples such as the Philly socialists who operate on giving
Okay.
or operate through
Our
education,
argument is that we
free
do not have to
GEDs.
defend one specific
Or-
form of that.
no,
Right? Our
or-
argument is that we can learn
Just-
from those
just dual
historical
power.
mistakes.
Just
right?
dual power. Okay, so dual power as a tactic is what the alternative affirms.
Yes.
Okay, so if we prove that that has failed, what happens to the
I mean,
alternative?
if you provide examples of past movements that have failed, we can it would have to be something that is necessary to the dual power form, not.
Okay,
Like,
so
obviously, a lot of parties in the past have failed because there haven't been
power
democratic
forms, and here
accountability
we fail.
mechanisms. We think the alternative would be.
If we prove that no, I'm talking about like collapsing the movement itself.
Yeah, but those would be like very like maybe like an interpersonal reason
Wait.
for why those movements.
Wait,
don't work.
interpersonal reasons collapse movements?
I mean, if that's the example that you, I'm just saying
Oh.
whatever the 2AC decides to say. Obviously, that depends on like what we say, right?
So it's case by case, but examples don't just. How do we just prove the desirability of the
Well, you
alternative?
have
How
to
do we
say
know
that
that the alternative
the
is good?
combination of vertical horizontal organizing is always bad.
Wait, you combine vertical and horizontal organizing?
That's what dual power means.
Okay, so horizontalism cannot be a link. Alright, perfect. Horizontalism
Well,
solves
our
the plan.
argument is that
Okay,
it has
so-
to be within a vertical structure.
Oh, but does the alt provide that?
Yeah.
Then
That's
the okay, so then that's the harm. Okay, the link debate. I guess I'm wondering what part of the app is a pessimistic rejection of organizing.
Well, that's sort of the part of cross-examination whenever I ask you, like, what are the ways that the affirmative thinks that you
Oh,
can make
so-
life livable?
so
And
sorry,
I talk
so when
about
you-
things like,
I hear you. So when you say organizing, what do you mean by organizing? Because it sounds like you were asking me questions about questions like reform. Does the alternative engage in reform such that communism comes about?
does the alt engage in reforms? Yes. The answer to that
To
question
produce
is yes. We
communism?
think those things are distinct from the affirmative
You
because
think
those can be material
retooling
demands
state
on
power
institutions that create.
Oh wait, I thought saying hang on. Okay, now so it's about engaging existing institutions, not building outside
No, it's about
institutions.
changing those institutions to be.
It's about engaging with institutions, like the USFG, or like the
But yeah,
one
it can
outside
definitely
the-
be demands on the
Okay,
USFG
how
for
does
things
that-
like healthcare,
Alright,
housing. All these
Okay,
things are
sure,
good
sure,
and
sure,
would
sure.
materially improve the lives of
Gotcha.
people.
What is the relationship between like the value and the alternative? Have you performed it? Is it education? Do you triage it?
Well, we think that the 1AC has a method. We think that the negatives method is preferable.
Okay. At the level of education in this debate, or
At the level of education practice.
okay, sure.
No problem this time. It'll be case K framework. I thought this was gonna do the same thing as. I'll send it to you. Okay, let me know whenever it's good.
It's in case KT, right?
I like I was about to say that.
I just typed something to say the document, so.
Sure.
Did you send out something with like?
Wait, so what was the order again?
Case K framework.
Okay.
Brandon Yeager. UTD. We are training UTDs limit setting approaches to the resolution, accelerating violence via accelerating violence via the dominance of nuclear family is constituted with the violence of nuclear weapons, organs, and hypervisibility demonstrates the creation of ideal systems along the backdrop of anti-communist propaganda and proves our impact arguments of demonstrating spectacularity. They implicate the broad political party of the 1 and C, which means they cannot access their arguments about clashing fairness before the affirmative. They cannot win without answering to a wide demonstrations implicate the nation building projects that necessitate the eradication of deviant population presumption. The actual 3 ways A, which transact projects the 1 C's retelling and its narrative of the disease, sharing of resources, add counter the coherence of anti-trans narratives, and make up epistemic projects. B is the liberatory project, the unity of revolutionary political projects, the back of the system to attitude out of politics and move towards material action against transitive balancing, which are about vacancies, networks to care about how describes the affected material collective and argument via transitionality, sharing of food, shelter, time, and entry through things like mismatches, meal sharing programs, or new what is sort of taking a public space for living proof the necessity of the app. Now, no presumption about transparency said any was the app's key for collective resistance and survival means you should refuse to presume to a transphobic status quo, reject the team conflation scholarship and practice. One, there's no link to the office. Material method I did that about. Second, returning in scholarship and practice are good focus. This trans cover practices. In orientation to scholarship, solve theory, coherence. That was our argument of bracketing. B argument was the ballot vote. If we win the method of F is good. No unique reason why voting negative is key to solve the impact will turn on a framework. Survival studies argument negation is good. That'll be on framework as well. Uniqueness over determines the ability to answer the article's evidence. What was not material about the one to see there beneath the narrative coherence SSV can only be material if it's using existing legal institutions. A so Zoe Zephyr improves trans senator who got kicked off of Montana floor when she tried to engage on the impact of transphobia means that not everyone connects those left to power that the guides are willingness to vote affirmative provides the material things necessary to make trans life possible in the face of overwhelming violence. Now finally it's not that benefit to their very well because they can produce meaningful clash over how to engage in local politics, which means the absence the carbon evidence which directly the distinction of in and out of debate. Obviously people in debate move through spaces in and out of the activity, which means the way we orient ourselves in debate is good. Second, the key to understand the historical moments of now there's argument about bracketing and above the Chanel evidence orientation of the absent the academy is good. The bracketing system to action on politics is necessary to move through its collectivity, which means the asshole the evidence don't know what deconstructed identities means, but we are winning the absent key to solve the quote real communities that respect and scholars in life become scholarly life that also concedes that orientations to debate matter which to double trans their argument above go to the cap K1 the cloud evidence social reproduction structures capitalism were linked to the K1 sees most as active social reproduction like Jorgen's cookie with a more productive and domesticity when gender against capitalism exploitation the case failure to rise in nuclear family means it reproduces the spectacle of white womanhood because the radiant capitalist response is absent in analytic of the gender dynamics of labor that link trans and there's a diminishing returns as the heavy to labor for the party before collective care means exhaustion chance people run out of steam before their tenant unions or free programs ever get off the ground. The one CPU's uniqueness will go out because the nuclearism is part of an effort to resync trans life now, and the nuclear family has already socialized combat to the party to reproduce intimate violence, forcing trans resistance into vertical and horizontal mechanisms traits off with collective practices of trans existentialism that key now means are impact outweighs it's about the here and now of how the strategies violence of trans people and against the party proliferates intimate violence against trans people and can't get off the ground before the alpha solve ongoing violence is the reason why an external sense of energy and care is crucial to enable trans people to participate in discussions of the party line. That means permutation to both solves other often want to see Hollis says that trans existentialism is key to move towards collectivity through new bracketing the situation to attitude out of politics of blue or evidence is desperately unspecific about what is or isn't performance of world making. They will not be able to win a convincing broad line between our half and the alternative, which means the permutation results in linking can overcome the performance resistance that constitutes the all independently. This is external office against a framework which forces us to think top down in their righteous any engagement with politics must be purely simulated. Triadize the apps model that double trans the cap K finally simulation can be contingently useful if they forego it means the alternative fails like the Marxist centers because you can't imagine future scenarios and use them to guide politics. The Groban evidence there's no link to aesthetics and scene forge trans are cover practice networks apparently liberatory strategies. Those are all material levels of case debate. The permutation used as seen as part of buying links to their link is about form and that's not separable from the concept of the one to see trans existentialism is key to move towards collectivity by bracketing the decision to attitude out of politics narrative coherence which solves narrative coherence read Jorgensen engaging in domestic and spectacular politics which reduce racialized violence via objection to one to see discussion of Marshall Laverne and Delisa proves that permutation do both racial capitalism mixing the material nuclear family coheres the devaluation of black trans went through a proprietary logical social reproduction that's day 21 what accounts for signal loss of professor Robinson black women trans and non-binary people registering these ethical crisis reproductions figures anti-developers today the most concerned about outside the proprietary logic of that heteropatriarchal family unit disrupts capital social relations as a threat to evaluating this more social reproduction of white wealth and black health sociality depart from nuclear family represent this all on populations fixation and wage knowledge obscures the gender racialization of value from which is only one expression of expensive gender seeking commodity determined labor racial capital and political libidinal and symbolic economy must be destroyed must be affirmed as the horizontal sociality and gender non-conformity black life mythologies because its violation of the value from the social and necessary reproduction of possessive whiteness as interlated as Davis confirms labor as a living shape prior represents the impermanence of things in the temporality impacting differently when the outlaws are dependent arguments are anti-trans they replicate violent transformation narrative coherence that will change people expensive me for the decline of Western civilization which mirrors far great rhetoric obviously are seems not to make or break when climate change which orients how you evaluate the impacts of the debate. The alternative one can exist without the next care the app has to it cross-ex proves that when they talk about base building means the alternative means the outcomes versus the permutation solves the second the alternative collapses and burns out trans comrades proven by their author Escalon Chambers organizing the Marxist Center Challenge 23 almost no leaders in the MC about the base hundreds of people burnt out less thinking politics are possible MC a disproportionate number of trans people transgender people from key part of MC's literature this makes sense given the transition is political event we're not the type base building would not have had the reach and how all the MC series came from trans people why do they not continue this road why was the main test base building point trans organizations away from the communities towards the people rather than seeking revolution potential in their own spaces and focusing ourselves on economist mass organization base builders create mass organization which had no political reason given by the failure of base builders to create a unified political organization stems from the same economics which led them to ignore the nature of their cadre. Going to go two framework. One, we restricting nuclear families forced through a program for trans existentialism. Second, counter interpretation of the app should be a method for restricting nuclear forces. For example, Disarming the nuclear family is column 21. Disarming the nuclear family definition of nuclear family since non-nuclear family actually with the Cold War backdrop. Remember, like the geopolitical landscape, the performance of domesticity blurs. The line between the two, the nuclear family uses anti-evasion tool, domestic containment price, preservation through the traditional family unit enforcement, rehumanization, secure generals, and stabilize post-war society, family for the wrong reasons. Dismantles the nuclear family are often where impacts are predictable limits, which is the internal intel. All of the impacts on framework. There's a narrative coherence. Instead, debate narrative coherence means the moment we speak in the register of transits, we're not speaking about the topic. Instead, we're told that we're quote voting for both jargon. It's incoherent nonsense. Maybe if we came from more respectable segments of humanities departments, we'd have a perfectly reasonable view that should be adopted by anyone with half a brain. But transits can only be incoherent in a narrowly coherent framework. This isn't new. For example, in 2013, they said, quote, this is not a debate. The rules and structures of debate have evolved to ensure arguments are logical. This is what I would expect from a 10-year-old. This means the limits are informed by form and content to decide what fairness and clash would look like, because their model puts inclusion before meaningful participation. There's three arguments. One is that predictability is completely negotiated. That's by multiple queer trends that seems predicted in the nuclear family. And the limits they said are arbitrary and dogmatic. Proof might want to see cross question about nuclear weapons not grounded in any part of the one we see. Second, the one we see boils evidence says that reading forces is built on white domesticity, the protection of large size houses, testing, making the tolerant bounce of white beauty under grid what is considered predictable in the first place under their model because they're unspoken apart from nuclear forces and turns every argument about clash in a vacuum. The lock will go for it. Third, the impacts of objection debates under their model require accepting the nuclear families and stasis which creates a standard judge which racialized trans populations are judged, which an impact argument that should perceive fairness. Only our model policies produces debates with clash over nuanced disagreements in critical theory like Marquis Space System, Feather Cameron, Marco Richard, Transmal, Justin, or Schecker, which proves there's ample ground. Their arguments about burden of rejoining the ballot inhibits revolution in class. For example, when members of the legal will concede the round to show is not about the ballot and people would stop engaging there, which linkers competitive incentives because those incentives are key to make them engage with transpedagogical methods, which means competitive incentives are good only under model framing issue limits disclosure are not unique in debate operates in coexistence of critical and planned debate now, which means putting negative results in the worst version of their model because basically means more sale by review critical ground by putting out results in the best version of ours because it self-centralizes based on nuclear forces. Next, the TVA and switch side to both epistemic constructions that rendered the F narratively coherent by sanitizing it for normative debates. Disarm TVA will not solve any part of the app that they will claim it does because it benefits them to posit their model is content neutral. There's an archive to say both of them are model is a call to saying that transpulsions must recognize the sets into the black radical tradition and refusing the insidious logic of spilling up in fear for a more radical politics sees and scatters and also says about this only this refusal of their model can actualize the political space for alternatives to the white national form that's Larson 23 black trans theory queers with the gender politics that pushes against necro political form is going to offer these debates are creating a debate across political elections scholarship there are common conventions and strategies building off of one another to generate affinities and pedagogies using debates many rather how so real time organizing where critical debate help participants and act friends of political engagement calling questions ourselves refusing negative solutions opens up political space for alternatives to acceptable lessons we learn do not so allow these teams counter and say with us is disable trans compatibility with paradigms the safety security and safety in favor of deadloads that facilitates collective planning proliferate spacing means this together we live in the deadly conditions we live in require inventive subversive practices but development like competitors and coaches and proliferating critical trajectories critical argumentation are parsing out the problematic single issue political range not less large grapple with our identity black argumentation not with trans to college embrace our identity invitation transfer power theories and then that church political struggle which knocks the sacrifice we have to dream bigger by fasting new who necessary to imagine futures made invisible random possible refusal is an unending project.
Can y'all give me like 1 second to go grab food?
Yeah. What is NL used for? Are you talking about the lesson of it?
Like
Or the case?
the case stuff.
Okay, yeah, so trans-archival practice is an orientation towards archives that the Hall of Evidence says, A, brackets the system that actually have a politics, which solve our argument about interference, and B, moves us towards collective politics that are necessary to resolve conditions of domesticity and spectacularity. I think an example of this is the way that the 1ANC engages in the narrative of Jorgensen, i.e. that traditional like understandings of nuclear forces would say weapons debates, but that the way the 1EC engages nuclear forces is through reading across the biosphere of the topic to understand how the nuclear family is bound up with those nuclear forces and therefore acts as the nuclear force itself, which is the argument that the 1EC makes about Jorgensen's transition, pushing news headlines of nuclear bomb off of the front page of newspapers, because that was more spectacular than the bomb itself.
No, I definitely get that portion of the act. I'm kind of confused on the second part where you said it connects to sort of like struggles outside of debate. Like I get the
Oh, sure.
of debate, but how does it connect to it?
One, we've rejected the frame that there is an inside and outside of debate. People in debate are not like robots that just like do debate and then go about their life. Like there's interaction between the inside debate and outside of debate. We think that we talk about, we think the things that we talk about here matter for navigating our daily lives because it teaches things about the world. It teaches us how to engage in strategies and tactics of resistance, etc., and that those things matter.
All right, then in that case, I guess my question is like, what is the app's specific strategy that is a good idea?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So there are three things that trans-existentialism is: liberatory strategies, networks of care, and archival practice.
I mean, I guess these are like sort of like, yes, these three things are good ideas. Like, what is the app's relationship to those things? What does that look like materially implemented? Like,
sure, I think that I gave examples of those things for in the 2AC, things like mismanaged needle sharing programs or renewable disorders.
yeah, but these are examples of like things that are ongoing, already
sure,
happening.
but
we
we okay. There's two arguments. One, we've said that trans-existentialism and specifically the curation of the zine is a unique combination of these things through the framework of trans-existentialism, i.e. the bracketing procedure of trans-phenomenology and trans-existentialism. That is the thing that solves the narrative coherence that inhibits collectivity in the status quo, right? That was the argument that 1EC made about Jorgensen. The Skidmore evidence makes about Jorgensen appearing, for example, on like magazines, cooking in the kitchen with her mom, that simultaneously produce the abjection of racialized trans people because Marta Olmos, Ramiro, Laverne Peterson, and Delisa Newton were non-white trans women also portrayed in the media, but in relationship to Jorgensen were abjected because of their position as non-white.
It also produces internalized violence because it means that we can only ever redefine a
like
relationship
10
that was
seconds
not
of so
close
really
enough.
quick theoretical reasons for rejecting sides, the presumption stuff.
Substantive on case presumption.
Huh?
I don't think so, no.
Substantive on case presumption. Substantive is direct.
10.
I think I connected two blocks together somehow. I don't know.
No, that's not very much. I know it's
Yeah, I'm just gonna wait for R and think about it. It's gonna be teething case, but I'll have to give it a gift. Oh, understand. Understand.
I felt that. I think it's because I didn't text.
We're not gonna
Yeah, we'll be.
Much better.
My application can. Like, I don't think there's a substantive problem with argument.
You have two cards, actually.
I just heard real quick. I agree with God's comments.
You would.
I agree with God's comments. I actually think the presumption stuff should have come out. Because of the provided an out double sound, just like we don't take an answer every word you're gonna say nothing, every new word you're gonna say. At least for this, or at least for that thing.
Yeah.
I know Josh for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting split too.
Okay, the cards should be set. There's only two of them. As teething case.
Cards.
DocuSign. Just
About to resend it. Overview?
slight overview. Yeah.
Like 3 cells?
I'm sorry.
Like 3 cells is enough?
Actually, yeah, that should be almost perfect.
Okay, great. I'm good.
Topical affirmative should defend that the United States should restrict its nuclear forces in one or more of the topic areas. Our interpretation doesn't prescribe a particular style or content, but having a resolution basis is key to determine research. The impact is procedural fairness. There are 2 warrants to this. 1, argumentative refinement. Competition drives innovation. The process of losing, refining strategies, then winning happens whenever we can have predictable debates over the course of a season. Debate is a game, and the reason why debaters spend so much time cutting cards and traveling to tournaments, breaking new affirmatives, is because we believe that debate has competitive merits. Their interpretation makes research obsolete because it encourages one ace to defend as little as possible, which devolves into empty theorization. 2nd, limits. Sticking within the confines of a resolution is key to test a well-prepared opponent. They can win that advocating for trans-existentialism is good in the abstract, but instead tying that to a resolutional starting point opens them up to political disagreement to test strategies and tactics. Their interpretation produces dogmatic individuals that shut down all engagement. You should ask yourself, if topicality was not a norm, would their political project make sense? If not, the affirmative is a political dead end that cannot lead to actualized strategies. 2AC1 is we meet. They do not. United States is a federal agency, not an individual person or people gathering for tea time. In the context of the resolution, that is the DOD or the NNSA. They have not counter-defined any of these agencies. The 1AR does not get to make new arguments. Anything new in the 1AR is otherwise new to our argument. Our interpretation has an intent to exclude and define because individuals cannot affect nuclear force policy, which is the U.S. Code evidence, and an additional topic education argument. The counter-interpretation is a limits disaster. Their argument is that you have to be, quote, something that restricts nuclear forces, but they have defined nuclear forces as anything that can even include the word nuclear and then have the word force after. Our argument is that that is both unlimited and proves by both limits are good because they have a counter-interpretation that limits the topic, and then in the next breath they say that they are impact-turning predictable limits, which is not only a double turn, but proves that their counter-interpretation is unable to produce the types of debate that they would like to have. Their impact-turning predictable limits is smashed by our limits is that it's much better for a debatable topic, and the way that you evaluate all of this offense is through the lens that debate is a game, and that maintaining a predictable limit on the topic is key to maintaining that game. Even if the game isn't the best thing since sliced bread, we're all here playing it, and maintaining the ability for the negative to be able to refine strategy over the course of a season is good. Narrative incoherence argument. 1. The affirmative does not meet the resolutional mandate, which is our argument about how it's not that you're talking incoherent nonsense. Trans-existentialism might in the abstract be good, but the fact that that's not tied to the resolution makes it impossible for the negative to test this. The second argument is that they cannot solve any of their impacts if all of their claims are about talking about how people say that they're incoherent nonsense. What does voting affirmative do for that? Whenever they leave this round, even if they get a ballot, how do people stop saying that those things occur? It equally raises the bar for solvency explanation in the 1AR and proves that you can vote negative on presumption because they don't actually solve any of the impacts that they have in the 1AR and 2AC, in the 1AC and 2AR. The argument that predictability is negotiated through community is false. The resolutional basis establishes the norm for preseason research and is how individuals can come up with, how teams can come up with things like the deterrence dissent, the so-called pro-lift dissent, and then we can read those things at Northwestern, and whenever the affirmative has a uniqueness push, then we can refine those strategies. Go back to Kentucky, fix the dissat, and then come back and have a much better dissat win percentage. But that can only happen whenever we have a model that has predictable clash over the course of a season. Their argument that their model allows testing and that it's somewhat predictable. The affirmative was not predictable, and it's not even about if the affirmative in the abstract might be predictable. It's about their interpretation because they justify affirmatives that infinitely can just say this one thing might be a nuclear force because it has that word in it, and then make that an entire affirmative. Think about a slew of affirmatives that can be justified by saying things like mining in and of itself is a nuclear force, and then the app could just get rid of mining, and that is a topical affirmative, which is obviously really hard to negate because mining is pretty bad, but deviating from the topical resolution is what makes those debates bad, is the point of this argument. Their arguments about objection debates being solved under their model and KBK debates, our model, and switch side debate equally can foster good debates over the topic and over your limited literature base, which is able to resolve a large portion of your offense about us excluding you. I will do that debate in just a second. Their arguments about how members of Louisville were... The affirmative cannot solve any of these arguments about how members of Louisville had things either happen to them or they did things and that was frowned upon or whatever. The affirmative cannot resolve this. And think about how whenever you give them a ballot, are people going to stop demonizing K-teams? Demonizing K-teams? Probably not. Once again, raise the bar for 1AR expectation. And just because people are fucking assholes to debaters doesn't mean that you can vote affirmative and feel comfortable deviating from the resolution just because you think that people outside of debate are pretty bad to debaters. Obviously, that is true. But an affirmative ballot cannot resolve that, which also harkens back to the presumption push that I made above. Their arguments that limits are non-unique is false. Our interpretation sets a limit, and there are 5 affirmatives that are all able to garner both offense from your educational literature base, but simultaneously affect the materiality of nuclear weapons that they have also made arguments about. The arguments of the topical version and switch side debate are distractions. No, they are good and solve the affirmative's education and access your portion of the library. I will do them proper. The topical version is that the United States should permanently disarm its nuclear forces. We do not have to be perfect. Any imperfection is negative ground. And the TVA proves that their discussion is not incompatible with reading a topical plan. You can read an app that affirms abolition and deconstructs things like gender binaries and the weaponization of those identities. Here's Atchison 23. Identities do not change policy perspectives. Do action must be beyond participation. Students right to activists and activation promotes the TPNW's framework for these consideration must facilitate the participation of those who bring lived experience and non-normative analysis. Abolition means seeking to deconstruct systems that cause harmful building of structures for justice and well-being that involves deconstructing gender and dismantling militarized masculinities, refusing to idealize notions of strong men need to be protectors, sustaining the ability to wage war, rejecting the gender binary, non-binary thinking, posits that all states, peoples and the living things share this planet and have a responsibility to care and collaborate and creating a better world enables better other forms of security based on peace rather than violence. Women, queer people, and the global south rejection of nuclear states' binary conception of security was instrumental to the TPNW's framing and success so far. Demands on the state are a productive center of discussion and do not tie us to the government or its legitimacy. Newman. And 11, the problem with working outside the state is that it may leave the state intact and entails self-industrial politics on demand making. Certain demands on the state to not go to war and to refer to declining and policing of the basic strategies of social movements and radical groups making. Making does not mean working within the state or reaffirming its legitimacy. And switch side debate is good, enables self-reflexive openness, and makes us far better advocates because we can see the pros and cons in our politics instead of being locked into an echo chamber. It causes better contestation because they can critique traditional understandings of nuclear forces on the negative. They can critique our affirmatives' attempt to disarm through the state on the negative, which is a lot of what their impact turns are about. But making them all into affirmatives makes the negatives research burden untenable and makes it really hard to garner good links to various strategies and be able to have the best debates and best types of clash over the course of the season, which is the terminal impact. They say archival disad not unique to our model. The topical version is good, and the switch side all allow for our model to sort of include your education in our archive. The Larson evidence the Larson evidence does not mean that you need to deviate from the resolution. Nowhere in this does it say that. It says that white debaters and trans debaters should be indebted to black debate and black debate practices. The end point of this is not that everybody has to be untopical. This card does not say that. It does not say that we all have to be untopical. So it's like not a T card. And even then, if yes, appreciate the black radical tradition in debate, but why is voting for the affirmative a way of honoring that tradition? You should ask yourself that whenever the affirmative has just said, fucked up shit happened to Louisville in the past, vote out. What does that do? You should ask yourself that question, and that is the big presumption push that I'm about to go for on the case. Go there now. 1NC1, the presumption ballot. The affirmative has a structural issue without a method for structural change. They cannot access any of their offense about trans folk being locked into a system of elimination whenever their arguments are based on them sitting around and having tea time or having caffeine and wine with each other. All of their arguments about trans existentialism being things like sharing resources, having liberating projects, and effective and material demands only matter insofar as the affirmative is actually doing that. But the issue is that they're not. They're just pulling up to debate and saying, this shit is dope in the abstract. Our argument is that that's a bad model of debate because, one, it reduces the scope of solvency to things that allow judges to be able to get away with broader bad norms in the community because judges can say, well, I voted for Iowa in this debate. I said that this was good in this debate, and then they can absolve themselves of that guilt, which is a complacency disadd to their model that they create ultimately worse advocates that cannot effectuate community change. The transparency disadd is not linked to us. We've impact turned this, and the Carpenter evidence says that reducing debate down and reducing your solutions down to debate is a bad strategy because of all the arguments I made above. It also locks us into a localist politics. That means that unless we are engaging with people in debate, they cannot be a part of our movement, which they link to the CAPK. Their argument is that you can vote affirmative if the method is good. Good luck with that because you have not performed that method. You've just read a bunch of cards in a linear way, subscribe to all debate norms, and you're probably going to do the same thing whenever you stand up in the 1AR. All the arguments about rejecting distinction between in and out. Those distinctions are important because, one, debate is a game, and second, it implicates their solvency mechanism.
First argument was argumentative refinement. Why is that good?
Argumentative refinement is good because competition allows us to be able to come to conclusions about which types of arguments are good and bad. The same reason how over the course of a season we have all come to the understanding nukes are pretty bad. Right, we think that process can only happen through competition and research.
One, why is it good to come to conclusions about what's good and bad? Like, how does your model uniquely?
If we shouldn't come to conclusions, then why should we conclude that the app is good?
I guess I'll just really my question more proper. Is like, why is that good under your model, right? We've made an argument about why competitive incentives are good for our model, but your model precludes that content. Why does your model produce uniquely good ways of coming to conclusions?
We disagree with the premise of that question. It does not preclude that content. We think that both the topical version and switch side provide ways that those discussions can be had, and in a much better and much more in-depth way than the affirmative has.
I'll get there in a second, but the second thing that you said was we can come to the conclusion that nuclear weapons are bad, right? But a team is going to be F and a team is going to be neg. How do we know that people collectively come to the right ethical conclusion about nuclear weapons?
Well, our argument is that over a course of a season and consistently doing research into things like deterrence policies, assurance, theory, etc., we can come to the conclusion over whether or not nuclear weapons are good. And having those conclusions is good because we've made arguments about how materiality sort of structures the arguments that you've put forth whenever you talk about the nuclear family. Okay. Materiality makes those things possible, which is why we need material demands to be able to...
Wait, then how does your model access rates about the nuclear family?
Topical version and switch side.
Okay, let's go there then. The accessing card, my first question, what is non-binary thinking?
Well, non-binary thinking sort of criticizes the idea that there are certain binaristic relationships to either debate or to nuclear weapons, i.e., what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like in the status quo, nuclear weapons are based upon certain binaristic dichotomies such as protector versus protected, weak versus strong, civil versus rogue. Our argument is that the 1AC can embody that politics, say abolition feminism is the term that Carr
What does it
uses,
mean
and
to
then they
embody
can
a
garner
politic?
offense off of the nuclear family.
What does it mean to embody a politic?
So like you can make your app about it. Maybe that's a better way to determine it.
So embodying a politic means making your arguments about something? I'm
Well,
confused
I mean,
about
have
that.
you not embodied your politics?
Well, I was actually going to ask about that in the
Is that
case
like
study. So
not
last thing
important?
that you said in this speech was that we didn't perform our method, and I want to know why that's true.
Yeah, so like you're like, we're making affective and material demands. We're giving people resources. What resources did you give anybody in this room?
Okay, so
It's like,
embodying an argument is not about reading it. It's about, physically doing something. What is
Well,
the distinction you're making here?
this is the issue, is that the affirmative has set the bar for solvency so high, is that if the affirmative does not engage in those things, one, presumption, because you definitely don't resolve any of your
Well, okay.
impact.
First of all, that's not true, but I'm asking about the thing you just said on
Second,
framework.
say
I'm
that?
asking about the thing you just said in framework about embodying our politics when we read the TVA.
Well, I think what I meant to say is that you can make your affirmative about it. Obviously, whenever you read the act,
so
like,
you're
abolition
going to
doesn't happen,
embody
but-
the actus in TVA by going out and doing disarm, and you think that's good? Like,
What?
There's just one card. Anyone oppose something?
What?
There's just one card.
You, body of the email.
Oh wait, you said docs or?
Yeah, you can put it in the body of the email.
I feel like anything more than one needs its own doc, but
Yeah, if it's just one.
I'm usually like 3 or more is doc.
Yeah.
Like, I always appreciate the document regardless.
Fact.
Like even if it's one card and someone's like, I'm sending a doc, like, I don't have a problem with that for sure. Makes it so much easier to locate cards later.
Considering I have like 30 docs open right now because of preparing kids, like.
That's the worst thing about debate tournaments, but also the best thing about after debate tournaments.
Yeah.
Getting to
Yeah,
close out all the
yes,
docs.
it's
Yeah.
such a satisfying feeling. Oh my god.
Like all of my RAM just cleared up.
Right? My laptop is happy. She's breathing again.
Okay, I need to plug in my computer and therefore I need to find out. Do you mind helping me?
Yeah, here, I have an extension cord.
Actually, I don't know if it'll reach.
Yeah, I have an extension cord.
Oh, that. Thank you. I've still not received the document, so
It just came from me.
okay. Click refresh. There it is. Oh, it's only one. Okay. Just kidding?
Yes.
Overview?
Yeah, but this one might be a little long.
Okay, I'm gonna move stuff down.
Not super long, I'd say like.
I'm not trusting what you're saying. No. the uncertainty got me a little bit.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
I'm just gonna
I
make
made
a ton of
space.
space.
Yeah.
Maybe that's for the best, yeah.
Sure it is. Alright, let's do it.
Everyone is good? Okay, great. Capitalism is a crisis. Now 3 arguments. First is militarism. Transnational capitalist views will review wars and enterprise will continue lighting their pockets and pushing fascist war hawks in office, creates international tension between great powers and triggers use it or lose it scenarios, creates militarization of the border and deterrence logic. And second is about social degradation capitalist based on a continuous system of resource exploitation on the planet with finite resources caused by biodiversity, collapse of rain, runaway warming, extinction, or unhandled panic goals. All these are the durable and handle evidence. And so third is structural violence for the bourgeoisie to maintain their monopoly on the power. Couples and shuttle money from the poor to the rich, currency upgrades, conditions for violence such as the modern police state prison, industrial complex, intergenerational impacts from nuclear mining and testing, then the impact reproductive justice of evidence and judgment structure. We will win turns case and root cause analysis of the act, which means that you should defer to the K, but extinction is a tiebreaker. It's irreversible and forecloses the ability to challenge things like anti-trans violence. It's not all the arguments about how violence is occurring now is only made by systemic exploitation, which means that the old would resolve these things. The root cause of it, the nuclear family is not a free-growing thing that emerged from nowhere. The traditional career trends and other deviant bodies historically linked to the economic process of industrialization, nostalgia for Reagan and family values for product of capitalism. That's version 2000. Trade social concerns, sexual behavior, gender, and development of capitalism, career identities are therefore closely tied. The development of capitalism is the breakdown of family production that comes with the predominance of wage labor, but sexual freedom is a threat to the development of capitalism for which laborers need to be reproduced. Family was essential to maintain the healthy emotional ties and reduce socialized labor area. Labor system in the family for the discipline and foster commercial pushing offer reflecting ideal capitalism rather than through the media and educational institutions. They say immaterial things matter. We agree, but there's two arguments here. First is the question of starting points. Yes, other things matter, but there's too many ways to theorize those things. Capitalism is a good way to connect the things between immaterial and material, which enables effective organizing. Second, the all will solve these immaterial things better, allows for an organized movement which has mechanisms to build and to kick out violent people, which corrects for interpersonal violence, which is better than the app and the framework set for the battle. Is a question of competing immaterial strategies to resolve oppression. Who benefits first? These advocacy skills teaches on how to advocate for communist politics and refine strategies to best address the crisis of capitalism. That ways capitalism is in crisis now. That was the overview. When the app is essentially the status quo, you should vote negative because only the alternative can solve their impact. Second is clash apples, infinite privatization only has to defend their method or molecules, rigorous debates about the Americans and 180 is the best middle ground. And then next, the permutation. First, they do not get one. This is a method debating terms, makes testing viability tactics impossible because it always becomes a question of whether one small part of the app is compatible with the alternative. They do not have a plan, which means the entire app is a plan. Anything that we disagree on is a reason that you should reject the permutation on phase and also collapse of revolutionary scalability. Second, the permutation is either severance or intrinsic better for clash and education because they can skirt K-links and I'll post talk, I'll clarify the app. And third, links are just as I'll do the link debate here. First is the aesthetics link that's Scrivener and was it 1AC center for focus on individualistic naval solutions to structural issues that play the world. Think back to the 1AC discussion about the ballot was a referendum of specific narratives and stories like the Jorgensen stuff. This is our argument about how shortlist solutions coming to the forefront throughout debate is about the way to conceptualize things like care creates divisions within the party and temporary reprieve from access to capitalism that cause exhaustion and psychic violence returns the app because people feel accomplished in the moment. They use a temporary reprieve to fracture alliances by leaving people to craft their own strategy. This is a spill-in argument that capitalist structures overdetermined debate, which makes the app project appear impossible to actualize. The TK is a permutation of reason. The app is a necessary starting point because it changes the way the debate currently operates in a hyper-productive mode to allow for the app to exist in the first place. But that means the old has to come first. Second is the materialism link. That's the cloud evidence. That's the imposition of solely discursive solutions such things like are unable to grapple with material impacts of the things like the modern police state or the lack of healthcare access for trans people. This is evident at the very beginning of when he talks about how trans people do not have access to things like gender affirming care. But ask yourself, how does the app strategy have a mechanism to resolve those things? Only the alternative has a clear way to deal with these material implications. The app is in favor of sustaining the vibe opposed to crafting concrete methods of achieving material redress, which deepens the revolutionary potential because it creates temporary moments of reprieve that defers a focus on movement building, which takes up the permutation. Next is the anti-statism dissent. Never having to listen to trans debates of political institutions is a dream of neocons and profit liberation. The app complements this by running away from political tactic building and matching what the world would look like if demands were met. Seems that political and case politicians will militarize the police raise, not race to see the doctor dumping waste in urban areas, passing legislation to hurt, etc. Without the state being forced to be held accountable for this violence. Next is the alternative, the all-digital power organizing the face of capitalist oppression, operating outside of bourgeoisie institutions, allows for forms of global solidarity to work towards an anti-capitalist revolution. This is the only strategy with the speed and scale necessary to get rid of capitalist structures before it's too late. They say dual powers of permutation not true. We have criticized the app specific method, which means that yes, we think that horizontal organizing can be good, but not the app's version of it. It has to be explicitly oriented against capitalism and connect to a vertical structure. Any reason, and also the arguments on all of the like solvency deficits all prove that they probably do not agree and think that vertical organizing is bad. Any risk of a link means that no permutation, the burnout. So if the app cannot solve for this, the root cause of burnout is violent structures like capitalism, which means that the alternative can resolve it because it deals with those structures in the first place. Asking yourself, what does the app's care mean? In a world where trans people are burned out from things like not having access to healthcare, which means it's try or die for the alternative to actually solve for material conditions like that. Well, the app cements those things into place. The interpersonal violence was answered above it all, but the app cannot solve these things. Ask yourself why interpersonal violence does not occur under the app's community care when given the lack of the 1AC explanation of what that community care looks like and what they do for people who act violently within those communities. The Allen evidence is our argument is that the people who did not want to organize because there was no effective communication on why people organize or how they organize. That's the app much more than the because the alternative says that organization has to occur of an anti-capitalist basis. Next, on the case page, apply the debate to set as a link to the cap stuff. That's the corporate evidence. They have reduced the 1AC down to the ballot debate, which creates ineffective resistance to the material structure that causes anti-trans violence. So this is all the arguments on the aesthetics things, which means that people do not participate in debate or cast outside the project of the 1AC, which is a localism link to the app.
Just like capitalism politics.
We have 10 minutes. Yep.
Yeah, ready to start.
we even hit this overview at all in particular or no?
The overview framework? Or the overview
The K, the one that.
I will frame the K flow through the perm, so wherever you flow that. What do you mean? Oh, super. Yeah.
Cards? Can you give me the order again?
Yeah, case, cap, framework.
Oh, yay! My Excel is freezing. That's awesome. That's so sick. Love that.
Your computer wants more RAM.
It can't get it, actually. I've got,
Oh
I've got 32, so at this point I don't really know what to do.
no.
Okay, I'm good now.
Okay, sick.
For a program of trans essentials that comes together around the kitchen table to break from the nuclear families aside of social reproduction, proliferate networks of care outside of it. Your ballot rejects their notions of content neutral competition and builds engagement of the racialized and gendered structure that they force you to see as inevitable, mundane, and neutral. We are winning with their model of debate of racist transphobic violence, not just through its content, but also through selective inclusion, through things like the TVA and Switchside conceded that links back to our two impacts of spectacular and necessity, which mirrors how Jorgensen's inclusion into the nuclear family produce external racialized violence through abjection of Lisa, Arnta, and Laverne, but also produce internal violence because measuring progress through inclusion means we're only ever defined in that which we, in opposition to that which we are not close enough, which is cross-sex of the 2AC, which proves that the reading of the 1NC and 2NC on framework is a speech act is the reason that you should reject them and do it affirmative regardless of trans existentials themselves, because their interpretation naturalizes trans argumentation as a spectacular outside of nuclear forces that could never be touched in the nuclear, which ignores the way that the nuclear family is the impetus for building weapons in the first place, which means that trans violence should proceed to now. There's no structural issue. Trans existentialism is an analytic method that brackets this attitude from our politics and reads across the biosphere of the topic in order to understand the intimate ways in which nuclearism is tied to the family. It does not reduce the scope of solvency. Instead, it forces teams to engage in kind of local methods, local methods that we can use in order to produce effective solutions. There's no complacency to that because their model is the one that produces the complacency to that. Fiat lets us move around things like red tape and never engage in the kind of skill building that would be necessary to actualize our politics, whereas the alternative can. Localism will be answered on the critique page, but the alternative links to it too. We have absolutely performed the method, but they have failed to engage in and outside of debate is a double turn with their argument on framework about how we would embody politics when we read the TVA now. I will do the little presumption stuff at the very bottom. It's about how the 1NC is reduced to the ballot. Our argument is not violence happens as base. Violence happens to people in debate. Therefore, the affirmative solves it. Rather, a subpoint. Our argument in the 2AC about Louisville was it's about competitive incentives. When members of the Louisville team would concede ballots to have discussion that showed that this is important to them, people would then refuse to engage in their arguments, which proves that competitive incentives are a good way under our model to force engagement with scholarship that might not otherwise be engaged. Visa point. This is tied to their model. They just had to, it makes an independent impact turn to theirs. It reads the archives of debate that their model is built on explicitly ignores the radical innovations that occurred external to resolution of focus, which is tied to backlash against black and transmitters. There is a reason Model C isolated every K team NDT octaves last year and called them incoherent. Now go to the CAPK. Frame the flow through the permutation and solves links, but we are impact turning the way that the alternative has called us to engage in state politics. There are three benefits of the perm that are discussed. The first materialism. That is the first link that is resolved by inclusion of the alternative. But Allen says that the alt alone denies the register of trans antagonism that happens in party organizing spaces because it foregoes the kinds the aesthetic dimensions of anti-trans violence. Two is the aesthetic link is descriptive, not predictive of the status quo. Yes, whatever the commodity in the system exists, that does not mean the app is not a useful project. Nevertheless, because the analytic of trans existentialism enables us to produce useful politics. Anti-statalism link is not privileged. It does have to us because they've considered there is other examples says engagement in those kinds of understandings politics is impossible for some, but the affirmative can solve. They've said specific now the permutation we get one in a methods debate because we get a permutation when the 2EC drops all of the fucking line by line. There's no, even if there's no plan, we have affirmed something that is foundational to the 1AC, which is trans-existentialism. LOL, it's the method, checks abuse. There's no severance because we've not severed any part of the 1AC. When they say that horizontalism can be combined with the AF, they're just saying that we don't go far enough, which is not a reason why the affirmative is bad. It's a reason why the alternative can resolve the residual links in the permutation. Finally, I will extend the day 22 card. It's hyper-specific to trans and black women's social reproduction that exists outside, that exists on the level of, that does not exist on the level of materiality or the political economy. Instead, forms of sociality that insurge against the nuclear family are key to queer Marxist projects because capitalism and social relations are both symbolic and libidinal conditions, valid claims through social relations, which it also says that resistance outside the nuclear family solves, which means that we solve their efforts, but they can't solve ours. Go to framework. I explained a decent amount of this on the case page, but I will extend the counter-interpretation of the attribute method for restricting nuclear forces. Fairness and clash arguments assume that our limits are all or nothing wrong, that homogenizes us and anything goes attitude, which erases disagreement in the K debates and robs framework of new outlets. They assume our model is unlimited, but that's not true. We have just impact turned to the idea of imposing procedural limits on content asks but our model includes substantive limits. Asks that use a single actor from nuclear mining would be checked by substantive arguments. The idea that we should refuse to negate based on procedural limits identify certain things as incoherent and non-touchable, which is based on dogmatic predisposition. There's only one correct interpretation of the resolution, which operates through from narrative coherence, and we've impact turned every time they say things like the ask could not have been negated without it being violent, or you're just empty theorization that precludes politics, or only the res op opens us up for real disagreement. Ask yourself, how do they think K debate happens now? It denies the generative tradition of it, which means that I would send the narrative coherence is not here. They rely on narrative coherence. It naturalizes the racialized gender assumptions that underlie the arsenal of preclude debates, but just trans life outside of it. They just interpret to be more predictable. Competition or model retools. I explained it on case debates. A game that fairness assumes a completely unlimited topic. That's wrong. Finally, fairness is not the only thing your ballot can solve. One is a fallacy word. Just because composition is a presupposition does not mean it's intrinsic good that always all else too. We don't evaluate the judge. We expect fairly judges make transphobic decisions. Judges make transphobic decisions all the time. Yes, we have impact on the idea of having a quote intent to exclude or define that is based in predictive and textual definitions, because the above piece of evidence says that we have been preparing and predicting differently for decades in a way that is not broken to the broken debate. Vote turns to TV and switch side. This is our distinction about inclusion on the topic versus the model that makes transness meaningful in its participation. They think that including non-binary thinking is enough to capture the rest texture as a meaningful trans participation, which is wrong. The disarmity text proves it has nothing to do with nuclear family trans people, period. It means the debates under the model development plan focus, which is exactly what happened in cross before the link and obfuscates any possible evidence of to the TV and switch side turn the starting point, because we have to be half the time. If we win the topical offense, then this goes away. This is they say not everybody has to be on topical. This is what Larson meant. We cannot accept compromises about the ways in which trans is allowed to come into the archive under their interpret only the frame of reformism, which denies the debt that debate has to the black radical tradition instead of engaging in it.
We have 5. is going to be case, topicality, decay.
Any weird flowing things for any sheet?
On the K, there's going to be like a quick overview, like some framing issues on the K.
Okay.
But everything else should be pretty straightforward.
Sick.
All good?
One NT1 pro negative on presumption they have a structural issue without a mechanism for structural change. Let's take a trip down memory lane whenever they said in cross-examination and the entirety of the 1AC that they have impacts such as trans folk being excluded and demonized for reaching for things like gender-affirming care. Whenever we talk about the examples in cross-examination, whenever we ask them what is going on and what does the affirmative do to resolve that, they say it's things like sitting down, having some wine and some caffeine and getting drunk with the homies just to get the vibes going. Our argument is that this does not do anything for the material structures and the logics of elimination that they themselves have claimed that trans folks are locked into in the status quo. Why is the affirmative ballot necessary? All of their examples about Lisa and Laverne, you have to ask yourself at the end of this debate, what does an affirmative ballot for Iowa AC do for Lisa and Laverne? What does it do for Louisville, who conceded ballots for discussion? The app definitely didn't do that, so why did they get to use this for offense? It's uniquely interesting how the affirmative only talks about Louisville whenever they can use it for interpersonal and political gain, and then they can manipulate certain judges into thinking that they can displace their own guilt onto the ballot. This is our dropped argument in the 1AR. I don't care about how good Ryan sounds in the 2AR. They've conceded that judges can displace ethics and guilt onto a ballot by saying, well, I voted for Iowa in this round, so I'm obviously a trans existentialist. I'm obviously down with the movement. Our argument, Impact, turns that and says that that is what causes complacent activists. Their argument that we are worse for complacency lacks warrants and lacks depth. We've made our, and it's about fiat, but we're not going for topicality in the first place, and we don't need to win any of those arguments. We just need to win that the affirmative is bad and doesn't do shit. The complacency dissat is an easy way that you can check out whenever we turn any of their activism offense. The distinctions good argument was made in the 2NC and was dropped in the 1NR. They have conceded that debate is a competitive game and they have a competitive incentive to talk about individuals and certain teams in a way that is politically profitable for them, which is all the arguments I made above, which proves that you should view all of the 2AR grandstanding through a lens of heavy skepticism. They've also conceded that it implicates their solvency arguments because they've chosen to go for out-of-round impacts and then make those both the focal point of the 1AC, the 1AR, and the 2AC. That is why they have to have some sort of out-of-round solvency and spill play. Otherwise, voting affirmative for Iowa doesn't do shit. The argument that they're just Impact turning our model is sort of resolve West not going for it not going for it in the 2NR, and we're also just waxing them on presumption. So even if they win that, reading to topicality in the 2NC was sort of bad. Who cares? The affirmative does not do anything. We just have to prove the app is wrong, and we've definitely met that burden. Go to topicality. We're kicking it, not going for it. Your counter-interpretation is baller. We'll have a KVK debate. New 1AR. It was a new 1AR cross-application, and them going all in on just saying things like, oh, we will just go for topicality, and you going for that in 2NC is bad, is what causes bad political strategies, which I will go for on the K. Reasonability. Anything else causes sandbagging, and it wasn't justified in the 2AC. Not going for it solves any of their offense, and we will just concede that we were wrong about topicality. Your model's pretty dope. We'll go for the K, and wax you on that too. Good enough. There are three framing issues on this page that make an affirmative ballot impossible. A sub-point, the role of the ballot. They have considered that debate is a space for competing political strategies to resolve oppression for communities in the status quo. We've made two arguments here. First is advocacy skills. It's the inverse of the arguments on the other flow because our model teaches us how to be able to advocate for things like communist politics, which can create material changes into the structures that the 1AC has talked about, such as healthcare, for example, which is an alternative example that the 1AR has definitely just dropped because they've chosen to go all in on the permutation. But you've put your eggs in the wrong basket. The second argument is the judge instruction and impact calculus. They've considered that capitalism is in crisis now. There's environmental degradation, militarism, and racial capitalism, all of which that coalesce to create massive cycles of structural violence and ultimately extinction. The judge instruction here was that we do not need to win extinction to necessarily win this debate, but is an external tiebreaker because you know no matter what, if you continue abiding by the affirmative's political register, then they will continually create systems that inevitably cause extinction and massive destruction. The militarism argument turns the affirmative, and with the turns case analysis that Mahinta did, because all of their arguments about the nuclear family coming from structures like nuclear weapons are only made possible by the military-industrial complex being able to capitulate to the needs of businesses and companies that make money off of selling various arms, which means that we have a turns case offense, a piece of turns case offense, a root cause argument, and an external impact of environmental degradation, which is the Durber and Handel evidence. It's super new, it's pretty dope, you should take a look at it. Go to the permutation now. We are going to win a massive massive risk of a link that outweighs and turns the affirmative and TKOs the permutation alone. Aesthetics. Remember back to when I see cross-examination, whenever I ask them, how do you make life live? They say, or how do you make life more livable? They say it's things like occulting, or having a vibe, getting together with the homies, having some wine, and doing all of these things. Our argument is that allows for temporary forms of reprieve in order for us to not be able to deal with the structural excesses of capitalism. This is a TKO to the permutation, and is the argument Mahita is making, because in the ways in which their politics necessitates less energy exchange, so they can ultimately just get up, play some music, say that we can go around and drink some wine with each other, and then everything is fine. But whenever you're not drunk anymore, you still have to worry about things like not having health care, being demonized for getting gender affirming care, all of which the alternative is able to resolve. But the TKO to the permutation is just so slayer, because the 1AR just did not answer this. Technical drops are important. It is the NDT. You should hold the line. The 2NR is the last speech that I have. I don't get to respond to the 2AR, and I don't get to respond to the 2AR. No permutations in a methods debate. They did not have a plan, and they did not have a specific advocacy. They have said strength existentialism, but they have tried to spin it as so many different things over the course of this debate, which means that you are not sure about what the affirmative actually does, how that is able to resolve any of their impacts, or why the alternative is not net preferable with an extra net benefit that accesses a disadd to the affirmative that outweighs the day evidence. Is the only thing I have to respond to. One, it's a question of starting points. Immaterial discussions are important, but there are too many theorizations of what that means or how to resolve those things, like how the day evidence cites feminism, Afro-pessimism, the nuclear family as varying theorizations for how social reproduction occurs. Only capitalism can account for material conditions, which is a good starting point to go about for resolving violence. That was all the arguments made above. And this argument at best is a perm takeout. We have impact turns to the permutation and disadds to it, which means that our model is net better. Also negative presumption.
Okay, 8:31. I'm not gonna lie, so I don't have to press my hand.
I think we should do that. Alright,
Starting point.
Apparently, the McAllister versus the NDT.
I know, I need you to write that down.
Wait, say this again? My bad.
I'll talk about it later, honestly.
Is everybody solved? There you start. But after we endorse trans existentialism as a liberatory strategy, never compare the remix the archive for senses to move towards collectivity. There's no shot they win, they win when we're really are linked to why existentialism must come first, because the bracketing of the system actually out of politics is key to solve the violence that emerges in our organized tactics and means that worse, you can vote in the permutation with the one sees more argument about drugs and reproducing domesticity and spectacular white womanhood because of her participation in the nuclear family, which is a prior question to their engagement in the alternative, which by the way is barely fucking accepting the 2 and R and Hall's argument about why trans existentialism is key to solving that narrative coherence because it challenges the individualizing logic that trans people are coherent by similarities in body or experience, and instead says that we are coherent by political logic that it's key to challenge the racist capitalist logic of white womanhood that prefigures all the impact they are going for the campaign's biggest piece of offense is that Allen evidence is dropped to the 2 and R in terms of all their case arguments and the campaign's use means we are winning a prior claim about why bracketing the system and attitude out of politics is key to more towards collectivity and solve narrative coherence, which is the thing that stretches the impact of the case arguments and the campaign will impact that more out on the campaign. But the app is good. The app solves the critique of nuclear domesticity under U.S. empire, which means only the app is able to provide a counter-argument to the way nuclear violence is contingent to both the interpersonal material dimensions of nuclear violence. Examples of new disorder backpack where needle shame prove this is their participating movements that enact the spaces of existentialism and literary projects, i.e. the way the new disorder takes up public spaces and utilizes in these places for transform making the distributes necessary supplies for surviving ongoing anti-trans violence. Here's the app's key to solve now the presumption arguments. Maybe they should have fucking flowed in the 1AR because they didn't answer any of our offense or defense on this flow. One impact arguments are spectacularity and domesticity, which are resolved by the bracketing procedure of phenomenology. The app does solve those. We don't have to win that the app resolves all of transphobia because that's obviously fucking impossible, and they haven't proven the case does that either. But we have one that the app provides a form of engagement that is able to resolve the material impacts of violence that exist in the status quo. For example, engaging the redistribution of resources among trans people, or engaging our type of practices that challenge the sort of things that prevent us from organizing collectively in the status quo are necessary modes of absolucy. Second argument is about the tokenization of Louisville. So for the one, there was no link to this. They dropped every piece of office here. Our argument about Louisville was about competitive incentives, i.e. when Louisville would give up the ballot, people would stop engaging with them, which proves that the model framework that they went for is one that is bad because it is intentionally talking bad, because those competitive incentives are necessary to provide force engagement with revolutionary modes of debate. It was a piece of office to the framework interpretation, not a form of tokenization, because it is a material argument about what way that their framework interpretation forwarded in model engagement that we think is bad. The argument above about absolucy resolve the impact to it and prove that the argument outweighs the rest of the case or the case arguments, because the argument about judge virtue signaling is also turned by the competitive incentives argument, because negotiating around organizing is good, because we should not automatically assume that one type of organizing is better than another. A judge adjudicating around between two different competing tactics of organization. Organization is good. There's no impact to the argument. No impact to the argument about virtue signaling, because the conversation that the app forwards is good. Finally, was the argument that the ballot voting for the can solve. But there's a framing issue, because what the fuck does voting negative do to materially resolve any of the impacts of the K either? We are winning both of the methods of the app is good in the abstract, and also that it is good for a debate, which means there's only arguments that the voting app is good. I'm going to go to the K page now. One, extend the Allen evidence at the top. It answers all the top of framing arguments. They drop to frame the permutation through it. Permutation do both way. And it implicates the alternative activity materiality is good, but the app things like getting drunk to that or meeting with we are just in a setting that performs the link of the Allen evidence. We are citing an empirical example about the Marxist Center who used the tactic of base building a large scale and collapse, which by the way their alternative author participated in the same organization. Allen says the reason why is because the disproportionate amount of trans people in the movement, including Alison Escalante, who is Their alternative author who were burnt out with dealing needs of others in large-scale politics were traded off with threads of intimate care through and in, and for transsociality that the affirmative endorses as a necessary mode of energizing, and that the permutation resolves also affirms their presumption to be in a case because either it's a conceded piece of evidence that says the kinds of transsociality that emerge when we recognize the attitude from politics matter, and change how we engage in spaces, orient our politics towards livability. It's a sequencing question to alternative solvents cases that trans people are overrepresented in lesser spaces, but burned out so often that it collapses entire nationwide movements like the Marxist Center, which flips extinction back on them because it means that putting negative on this link or consumption is the thing that precludes the fact of organizing, because it de-energizes trans people instead of care answers the topical argument about the ballot. They said that we need to teach people how to do communist politics, but that dogmatically assumes that the act is meaningless in the first place, which is the link to the valid evidence, the extinction warrant to solve it with the permutation. There's no word for how the ballot solves it, and they think that that's great, which means there's only with the alpha ways the root cause argument is turned by the drop use of day evidence, which all extend here as well. The day evidence says that social reproduction through the home prefigures our ability to engage in collective politics, which both accept the affirmative solves, and that the permutations cause permutation solves, because it says that disrupting the traditional nuclear family unit is anti-capitalist and moves us towards anti-capitalist collectivity means it solves the alternative that zeros the link to the static argument does not link to the alpha, largely answered by the case phase, but the proposition that the alpha is getting drunk and then thinking that we shouldn't do anything anymore is borderline offensive characterization of the affirmative that I guess all trans people who drink wine are drunkards. I don't fucking know what that's supposed to mean. What else is not just aesthetics is a material form of resistance that solves the ongoing violence and status quo, proves the whole link to it, proves the link to the valid evidence, which already outweighs, because the overrepresentation of trans people in communist spaces proves that there's an inherent ability of trans people to be collective, which is the argument that the 1EC made, the 1EC Hullet evidence made, and that their move to describe the act as all these things that it's not proves the link, because it disavows the way that trans people need in the moment to get certain forms of care that's specific to trans people that the alternative disallows. Perm solves.
Yay, baby.